All right. Hello, everybody, once again. My name is Alan, and it's that time. Let's talk some metal. I am really excited for today's video because I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite styles of heavy metal, which is the new wave of British heavy metal. And I'm going to be showing you some of my absolute favorite singles that were recorded out of that movement. I first became aware of new wave of British heavy metal in probably very late 1991 or early 1992. And my gateway to the whole scene was this compilation, New Wave of British Heavy Metal, 79 Revisited. It's a 2 CD set put out on Metal Blade. This was hyped a lot at the time because it was compiled by Lars Ulrich, some guy in a metal band you may or may not have heard of. But he was always a big fan of a lot of New Wave of British Heavy Metal bands, so they put a lot of work into this. It was supposed to have come out in 1990 for the 10th anniversary of the new wave of British heavy metal explosion. They missed that date by just a little bit, but they still got it out. It's a really nice compilation. It's a very good introduction to the entire genre of music. I'm not going to go through all the tracks or anything, but I picked this up pretty close to when it came out of curiosity. I had seen it talked about in Goldmine magazine, which was one of the big music publications from back in the day. And I was really blown away that they had so many cool songs by these little bands that I never had heard of before. And I got just very interested, wanting to dig into what was this whole movement about? Who were these bands? Where could I find their records? I was a high school student living in the rural South, so the answer was you couldn't find their records anywhere. I remember one time I was at a Camelot music store and I asked the guy behind the counter if they had any Diamond Head records. And he asked me why I was interested in getting neo-Nazi music. So yeah, that was my reality. They didn't have any Diamond Head records at Camelot, by the way. So it took a while, but I did start to find pieces of new wave of British heavy metal vinyl here and there, and been collecting it ever since. So again, today I'm going to show you what are 5 of my absolute favorite singles. I'm not going to say they're the best 5. They're just 5 that I think are really up there and always deserve mention on that sort of, my personal favorite new wave of British heavy metal singles. The movement was very interesting because a lot of bands never got past the single stage. They may have recorded a demo here or there, and a lot of them pressed a single. Not a lot of them moved on to make a full-length record. So this is a genre that if you're going to collect it and really explore a lot of the bands, you got to get used to the idea of dealing with singles. And yes, singles can be sort of an annoying format because you constantly have to get up and flip them over from side to side. But at the same time, they do make you pay a lot more attention to the music. You can't, sit down and start reading something in depth or working on the computer or something because, 3.5 minutes later, you're going to have to be interrupted, get up and turn the record over. So they are a good way to sort of focus on the music. But enough with me prattling on. Let's look at some of my favorite new wave of British heavy metal singles. First up, we have the debut single by Sweet Savage. This has Take No Prisoners and Killing Time on it. Sweet Savage was one of the really aggressive bands in the new wave of British heavy metal. A lot of people, when they hear the term new wave of British heavy metal, they tend to think more of bands like Saxon or Sledgehammer or Samson. Bands that, they're good, but their sound by modern standards is a bit dated. They're not necessarily all that heavy. They're things that, lean more towards the hard rock side of the spectrum sometimes. And so a lot of people will always say like, oh, new wave of British heavy metal, that stuff's just not heavy enough for me. You need to listen to Sweet Savage. There's a lot of variation in the new wave of British heavy metal. Bands played a lot of different styles. New wave of British heavy metal isn't a musical style. It's more a term that refers to just a time and a place of all these young bands in the early 1980s developing the modern heavy metal sound, taking it out of the 70s and turning it into the heavy metal as we know and love it throughout the 1980s, 90s, and up to today. And Sweet Savage was one of the really raw, wild, and aggressive bands. Songs are very fast. They were really sort of, laying the groundwork for what would become power and speed metal and influence on a lot of thrash bands that were yet to come. Sweet Savage never did a whole lot in their career. They made another single a few years later. It sounds good, I like it, but it has a very different sound to it. But they're probably best known because guitarist Vivian Campbell went on to play with Dio after he left Black Sabbath. And he also, from there, going from strength to strength, joined a band called Def Leppard that I hear was pretty good. My sister could not stop obsessing about them back in school. Hi, sis. I remember that too. You had so many posters of Joe Elliott. But enough about that. The Sweet Savage single is one of the genre's very finest, so you should check it out if you can. Now, little collector's note here. You'll notice this came on a yellow record label. This copy has black print. That means it's a second pressing of it. The original pressing had red print on it instead, which is what this copy has. So there's the first pressing. You can see the difference very clearly. All the lettering is done in red font. This is the original from 1981. Second pressing, I don't know exactly when it was done. It was done pretty early on. It's not a much later reissue or anything, but it may have been a year or so after the first pressing with the red lettering had already sold out. Excellent single. If you're somehow unfamiliar with the band, do yourself a favor, check out some of their songs. They have some incredible tracks. They did a few compilation appearances and other things, and they're one of the best of the genre. All right, second one that I want to show off. This was a record I obsessed over for years before I could track down a copy of it. No fancy picture sleeve this time. It's just came in a plain sleeve. It's on the zip label, and it's by a band called Reincarnate with Take It or Leave It on one side and Metal in Disguise on the flip side. This is another just true smoker. Absolutely great. Both songs are very strong. Tons of hooks, tons of energy, really, really great, top-notch new wave of British heavy metal. This is one that somebody had sent me back in my tape trading days, instantly fell in love with it, immediately started looking for a copy of it, banged my head upon many, many a wall trying to track it down, and eventually did manage to get it. I believe I got this when Terry from Boulder sold part of his new wave of British heavy metal collection back around 2004. If I remember right, that's where this copy came from. A few copies of this did come with sort of a pseudo picture sleeve that was meant as like just a promotional device. So there is a variation out there that does come with a little bit of insert material. Those are extremely hard to find. I'm not sure I've ever even seen a copy of that, but they are confirmed to exist. Regardless, you don't have to track down some insanely, hard to get or expensive picture sleeve version of it. Hop onto YouTube. You're already there, and I'm sure you can find the songs to check them out. High quality, new wave of British heavy metal. Band does not get enough respect. They did some great stuff. I think they did record one demo, if I remember correctly, but the songs, when I heard it, did not impress me a whole lot. But the single is absolute 2 thumbs up stuff. All right, third one that I want to show off here today is from one of my favorite bands from the entire new wave of British heavy metal, and it is Crucifixion's Take It or Leave It single. Flip side has On the Run. Crucifixion I've mentioned on videos before. They again have a very raw, very aggressive sound, much more energetic than a lot of new wave of British heavy metal tends to be. Both these songs are very powered up. This is their second single from 1982. It's the same year that the Reincarnate single was released in. This one was on Neat Records. There are other releases. The first single was not. The EP they did was on Neat Records also. These are 2 short songs that just completely kick ass, take names, and blow you away. Crucifixion, interestingly, it's not on that new wave of British heavy metal 79 Revisited compilation I showed earlier. I found about this band off of a different compilation called All Hell Let Loose. It's a compilation that has been recycled with slightly different track lists under a lot of different names over time. It was originally, I think, put out on Neat Records under the title 60 Minutes Plus as a cassette compilation release. On vinyl, it got an Italian pressing as All Hell Let Loose, which is the one I found back in the day. It also got a CD reissue under the name Metal Minded. And again, the track list, sometimes there's a couple of songs swapped out on it each time. But it had a Crucifixion song on it that completely dropped me to the floor the first time I heard it. I knew I had to find more stuff by this band. And this little single holds kind of a special place with me because if I remember correctly, it's the very first new wave of British heavy metal single I tracked down when I started collecting this stuff. As I mentioned earlier, I first became aware of the movement in early 1992, and I got this single off of a mail order list in the summer of 1993. It was one of the first times I had put in an order with a vinyl dealer for some rarer, harder to get new wave of British heavy metal items. So flipped a lot of hamburgers to pay the vinyl bills that particular summer, but I got some great records, including this one. Some other things here related to that single. Because I'm collector scum, and collector scum sometimes have to get lots of stuff, here's a test pressing of the Crucifixion single that I just showed you. This is from the original. The single has been bootlegged. If you see a version of it on colored vinyl from time to time, that is not an original. It was done in the 2000s, much later on. It's a good budget way to pick up the album. Again, it's got killer songs on it. But this is the original test printing. The matrix numbers are the same as on the Neat pressing. So I'll give a shout out to an old collecting buddy, Mario, in Italy, who helped hook me up with this years ago. Mario emailed me one day and said in slightly broken English, "Hey, Alan, I have a Crucifixion record that you don't have and you need." I said, "Mario, what is it?" He said, "Crucifixion test pressing." I wrote back, "Shut up and take my money." And that was that. So kind of a fun, neat collector item for Crucifixion. Both their singles are great. Their EP is very good. Their song on All Hell Lets Loose is an absolute smoker. It's one of the strongest tracks to come out of the whole new wave of British heavy metal. The band's material has been collected on an anthology recently, so you can track it down on CD, hear everything they did. Really, really great stuff there. Last note, while I will then stop gushing about Crucifixion, the track On the Run also got covered by the band Zool. This is a band from the 2000s. Really, really good traditional style heavy metal. I was online buddies with Mike Busher for several years. We did a lot of CDR trading. I sent him lots of old new wave of British heavy metal stuff, and he really latched onto it. And his band Zool ended up covering a couple of songs on their singles. So if you've ever wondered why the heck did Zool put a very obscure new wave of British heavy metal track on their 7-inch, that's why. They also put another new wave of British heavy metal track on their other 7-inch from one of my least favorite singles of the entire genre, but that's a story for another day. All right, 2 more singles to show you today. The next 2 are the ones I will give as my default answer as my personal favorite new wave of British heavy metal singles. If you ask me on any given day, which one do I like best out of the whole genre, I'm going to pick one of these 2. All right, so top 2 time. First one is Chargers, Desperados, backed with Are You Out There? This is simply one of the finest singles to come out of the new wave of British heavy metal. It has a very amped up sound. Desperados is lightning fast. It's practically speed metal. Are You Out There isn't as fast, but it has a very big fists in the air. This song was meant to be chanted by thousands of fans filling an arena. Pretty sure that never happened for the band. Sad. It is an incredibly great single. So another one that took a while to track down, but really happy I got it. This copy came off the sort of legendary Jim from OPM Records when he sold off his collection. This was one of the few items I was lucky enough to be able to purchase. He did a lot of eBay sales. It was a big deal in the metal collecting community back in the mid-2000s. A lot of extremely rare stuff got sold back in those days. And I'm really, really happy this one came home to rest with me. Interesting tidbit about Charger. They didn't do any other recorded material to my knowledge, except I think they had one song on a compilation. There's always been a lot of debate about the date this single came out in. There's no information on the single itself that tells you when it was recorded. And you tended to see a date of 1984 circulated pretty widely for a long time. However, when Malcolm Macmillan published his New Wave of British Heavy Metal Encyclopedia back around the year 2000, it's kind of the Bible for folks that were really into this stuff for a long time, Malk made a really good case for the single coming out in 1987. And he kind of pieced this together from figuring out, some of the guys had been in other bands and other projects, and it didn't seem like there was really a good opportunity where they would have been working on together on Charger material and getting a single out until 87. And there was a lot of pushback from collectors and dealers that, oh, no, you're out of your mind. There's no way this could be a 1987 release. But Malk had a pretty good rationale for it, I thought. And I always felt like a lot of the pushback on the date and people insisting it was from 1984 was really because they didn't want to admit the record had come out so late. Most people consider 1984 to be sort of the last year that the new wave of British heavy metal did a lot of quality material. That after that, the movement kind of ground to a halt. There are some good releases from 1985 and even 86, but most of the bands by then had either broken up or past their prime, had moved into, just sort of very commercial, mainstream, AOR, rock territory. And so I think it really bothered people that how could a record this amazing have come out so late? 1987, New Wave of British Heavy Metal is off everybody's radar. And so you still saw for a long time people insisting that the release date was 1984. This was an argument I had with some of the overlords over at Metal Archives for a long time that, I kept trying to get them to change the date to 87. And they're like, oh, no, we think it's 84. I'm just like, I think you ought to look through this article. There's a really good timeline here that shows it's probably not as early as 84. Oh, no, that book is full of errors. They don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, hey, it's your website, Chief. You put whatever date you want on it, but I don't think that's right. And at some point later on, they did eventually update it and have it listed as a 1987 release now. So probably more information than you wanted to know about when the single did or didn't come out. But again, I think it's one of the best the genre ever produced. All right, that leaves one more. And again, I'm not saying this is better than Charger. I'm saying it's tied. Those two are my favorites. So what's tied with Charger is this one, Mandys Prey. Got Running for You and On the Borderline. This one has this very iconic picture sleeve. A lot of new wave of British heavy metal singles had these monochrome picture sleeves where it was a black and white design. Mandys Prey had a blue and white design. Great image of a bird carrying a guitar. Can't get much more metal than that. And both these songs are incredibly well done. Now, this is not really powered up, raw, aggressive stuff like Crucifixion or sped up, proto-speed metal like Charger. These have more of a classy, polished sound to them. They're very much heavy metal, but it's going to show more affiliations with things like Thin Lizzy influences, rather than the Jaguars and the Sweet Savages of the era. Regardless, both songs are incredibly well written. Great musicianship, really strong vocals from G. Seymour. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And just wonderful single. If you don't mind the more sort of melodic, mature, for lack of a better word, sounding new wave of British heavy metal, this one should be on your radar. Mandys Prey, another band that never found that elusive album deal. They did have some compilation appearances with really strong songs. They were on one of the Metal for Mothers compilations. They were also on a very small, obscure compilation called Parkside Steelworks. If I'm not getting my compilations mixed up, it's late, I'm tired. These are very old records. Sometimes I get them mixed up. They made a second single as well that even the band admits was not a great release. When you look at the band photo on the second single, they've got the sort of, poofed up perms. They're wearing sort of the fancy, smart looking blazers. And right away, you start to worry this single is not going to go anywhere. One of the songs on it is a cover of Wonderland, the old Demon song, which is sort of an odd inclusion for their single. They didn't do a bad version of it, but why would you put that as one of the songs on a 7-inch? Even the band admits it was sort of more of a record label pressure, their management trying to get more attention to them, and they went along with it and later wished they really hadn't. But regardless, they made that one incredible single and lots of songs on compilations as well. A couple of footnotes on Mandys Prey. I was fortunate enough to do an interview with G. Seymour years after the fact. He still worked on recording music. I think he moved to South Africa for a while. But regardless, I had tracked him down at one point, ended up doing an interview with him. It was published in Steel for an Age, which heavy metal fanzine out of Greece. This was issue number 4, came out about 5 years ago in 2015. And I talked to the guys. They were really nice and willing to include the interview. So we got the back couple of pages for me asking G about his time in Mandys Prey. Some cool information in here. He talks a little bit about when they toured with Thin Lizzy. I think it was for the Renegade tour. Was a really nice guy, answered all my questions, was really cool about it. There is an anthology collection that's come out since then that has all the Mandys Prey material collected along with some great live material, something you should definitely check out. Some excerpts from the interview are actually included in the packaging on the Digipack version of the anthology. So if you don't have this issue of Steel for an Age, you can also read some excerpts from the interview if you pick up that particular version of the anthology. Okay, so there you have 5 of my personal favorite new wave of British heavy metal singles. I have talked long enough. Now it's time for us to continue the conversation. Let's move to the comments below and let's talk some more metal. What do you think of these 5 singles? Or do they make your top 5 list or not so much? What are your 5 favorite new wave of British heavy metal singles? If it's a style that you haven't explored because you're worried that too many of the bands are going to sound like watered down Def Leppard or something, there's a lot of variation in those bands. You have doom metal, you have thrashy stuff, you have speedy stuff, all kinds of stuff. I would highly encourage you to check it out, give it a chance. So leave a comment down below, and I'll talk to you again soon.